I am going to do my best in the future to balance things out. I'm going to do my best.
Now, I've been critical of the efforts to get Rogan thrown off the air, but I've also said that given Rogan's massive audience, he does now have a responsibility to get things right, and I'm glad he's recognizing that. It's also true that the outrage directed his way does seem to have made an impact.
If I pissed you off, I'm sorry. And if you enjoy the podcast, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to Spotify. Thank you all the supporters, and even thank you to the haters, because it's good to have some haters. It makes you reassess what you're doing and put things into perspective, and I think that's good too.
That's how public discourse ought to work. The haters should be heard out, and if their complaints are valid, the hated should take that into account. Rogan is saying that he's willing to do that. But if the left responds by continuing to pressure people not to go on his show, it'll be impossible for him to make good on that promise. It's a good offer. The left should try to take it. And one reason I wanted to play the longer clips from that video is that it's very clear, if you look at the discourse going on Twitter, for instance, that basically nobody watched the actual video. You have people saying like, oh, he didn't apologize. All he said is, oh, I'm sorry if you feel bad. There was some real reflection in that video that he posted. He's like, look, I've made mistakes. One thing I've done wrong, I could do better. Have other voices on after I have like a crank, like a McCullough. He doesn't call him a crank. My view, crank. After I have a McCullough on, I have somebody else on. That's the opening. So tell him, hey, pitch him. Here's somebody who's great. They're engaging. They'll do an incredible 4-hour show, and they'll move your audience in our direction. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, I hope the left listens to you. I mean, you're absolutely right. This is just indicative of this problem in some aspects of the progressive left or progressive liberals or whatever you want to call them, where it's like no one is good enough. You have to be good enough to be worthy of being in dialogue with us, for us to want to be involved with you at all, and no one is good enough. Especially not someone who has occasionally heterodox views on cultural issues or social issues. The economic stuff, they don't care that much. I mean, the Twitter punditocracy on the liberal side, the progressive side, is very interested in social issues, cultural issues, not so much the stuff that you care about and so many of our viewers care about. And it shows, and it's a massive lost opportunity that will driving Rogan into that audience further. It's further right. It's driving them in the direction you don't want to go. I think so many people just don't understand how influence is supposed to work. How you want to build a bigger coalition. You want to claim people for your side. It would be better to be able to say Rogan is one of us. His people are potential us
and
people.
And you're one of us, right? Yes. Not the opposite signal that you're sending. The signal that they're sending right now is that it is Joe Rogan versus Move On and all of these other organizations on the left, that they are enemies. And so then if you're a fan of Joe Rogan, which apparently there are tens of millions, because if you're getting 11 million per show, not everybody's listening to every show. You get people who are like, I'm skipping all the comedians or whatever.
Right.
So that means there's probably tens of millions of people who.
Which is huge. We cannot understate how big that audience is. That's bigger than watching the successful cable news shows.
Rachel Maddow is 1 million or 2.
Yeah.
Right. Every night. And Tucker Carlson, the biggest show on cable, is 3 or 4 million or something like that. And he's just blowing all those out of the water. So you have this opportunity. You have a guy saying, I'd love to give you 3 or 4 hours to talk to an impressionable audience of potentially tens of millions. Because the Malone episode got like 40, 50 million listens.
And people have done that. Sanjay Gupta did that. They had a very interesting exchange.
It was good.
It was a great episode.
So do that.
She's sitting out from The View. She's been suspended. And, she's got a different view, ironically, even more ironically for a show called The View. The hosts rarely allow other views other than their own. And, look, this is karma for Karen, right? She gets, by the way, if you don't know, her real name is Karen Johnson. She adopted the name Whoopi Goldberg. And the fact that she even took on the last name Goldberg is actually a discussion that could be had. And maybe the real reason she should be canceled, if she's going to be canceled at all. And look, I hate to defend somebody who has actively called for the censorship of others with dissenting and just different ideas. Whoopi Goldberg has been at the forefront of the culture of censorship. And so she's getting a bit of a dose of what she's been dishing out. She is getting karma. That is absolutely accurate, and she deserves it, every last bit of it. But for those of us who believe in the discussion of ideas, those of us who believe in allowing for free thought and for people to have different ideas and to hash those things out, this isn't really a win, as much as many conservatives would absolutely love to cheer Whoopi Goldberg being censored or canceled or sidelined. You're seeing a lot of conservatives actually not cheering for this. Now, here's the thing. When it comes to topics, really all topics, but specifically history and science, these topics need to be discussed openly. Instead, we have this culture of diss rather than discuss, and we should be discussing differences in viewpoints when it comes to historical happenings, what really were the causes of history. Science, we've seen this throughout the pandemic. Science has been silenced rather than openly debated. We used to have a culture of if a doctor gave you a diagnosis, you would go to another doctor for a second opinion. Now suddenly you're not allowed to have a second opinion. And we do know that when it comes to history, the victor gets to write what is written in the history books. But not only that, but we should be able to always look back at history and dissect it and pontificate on it a bit more than just what we read in our history books. And that is what Whoopi Goldberg apparently wanted to do. And she has a different view of what happened. She has a different view as to why things unfolded the way that they did. Plenty of people do. She's not alone in her viewpoint. Believe it or not, a good chunk of people actually agree with Whoopi Goldberg. Maybe not her audience, because The View has cultivated a particular type of audience that's watching them. But plenty of other people actually said, I don't know if Whoopi Goldberg was particularly wrong. And that is why her ideas should be discussed rather than just dissed. Rather than silence her and sideline her for 2 weeks, why can't this be a topic of discussion? If you're not going to discuss history and instead it's just going to be something that, no, you read what's in the history book, you accept it, and then you just regurgitate it, and there's no room for nuance, no room for disagreement, no room for discussion, then why are we even learning history? Are we learning it because we're wanting to learn from the past? We're wanting to use those examples, have discussions, and prevent them from happening again? Or are we just using it to shame and to feel guilty? So we need to be able to have these discussions.
What I'm really interested in is how much of the coverage of the Cuomos was affected by this very confusing and entangling set of conflicts where you have this person who is involved with the head of CNN who first worked for him or worked with him at another cable network, and then was in the Cuomo administration, and then is at CNN with Zucker, with Chris Cuomo, in the midst of this all this news relating to Andrew Cuomo, and then also Chris Cuomo. It's a situation where you can easily imagine a lot of specific bad calls being made because everyone is too involved in this for various reasons. And that is what I expect will be the trajectory of this conversation, is finding more about that kind of stuff.
Right. So as you note, Alison Golis, who is Zucker's partner, she served as communications director for Andrew Cuomo in between her stints at CNN. And that was around 2012, I believe. But what's interesting about that is, and that is a kind of another example of how I think kind of disgustingly, it's kind of like a revolving door that we see in so many industries, and here we see it in media and politics. But what's interesting is that Golis is not being disciplined, and she's not losing her job. Zucker is. So while I think that is a potential conflict of interest, or and just speaks to the generally kind of incestuous relationships we see among political and media elites, it doesn't seem like that's the thing that is being punished, because she is remaining there.
Right, and that seems fair, right? The subordinate shouldn't be the responsibility of the subordinate to report that. Like that puts you in an incredibly awkward situation.
Well, you mean to report the relationship with Zucker, or to report the thing? Well, she wouldn't have to report the thing with Cuomo. That's just general knowledge,
Right,
obviously, on her
Zucker,
resume.
the relationship with Zucker.
Right.
Well, yeah, right, and I don't, right. She shouldn't be fired for that. I don't even care if he's fired for that. Frankly, the issue is
Which
that
he's not being.
But should she be disciplined for?
Right.
Did she, advise him in both the professional capacity and her personal relationship with him that, hey, it'd be a great idea to put Chris Cuomo and Andrew Cuomo on air together to shoot the breeze and
never talk about nursing home.
right?
Yeah.
And this nursing home thing is not a big deal. I know Andrew; he wouldn't have done this, and we're like, let's not. That's the thing I'm interested in, if that was going on.
But again, to be fair, that's what I was saying when she's not being punished. Like that's not.
Yeah.
If that were an issue, then she would be facing something. I'm not saying it's, I think, again, it's pathetic because it just speaks to how normalized and typical it is for people to have these conflicts of interest. But that's not at play here, obviously. This is what is at play is the relationship between Zucker and Gollust.
Well, and apparently, according to reports, she ended up getting this job at CNN. And, to your point, or to Megyn Kelly's point of how many people were passed over, she apparently got this job at CNN. And when she got the job, people were wondering, why did she get the job? Because the job wasn't really needed. They were saying that they already had somebody doing the job. And so it was really unclear to people why she was being brought on, and she didn't really have something to do. So it was just very odd to people. But, really,
that's pretty common, right? In big company, media companies, all like, what does this person even do, right?
Right. What's the job? But, to your point, Katie, of this just showcasing kind of this incestuous behavior. And also, and I think that is really, a lot of people kind of wonder, why do we care about this scandal so much? But because it is two consenting adults. And so what is the big deal? But at the same time, it is a big deal because it is showing this revolving door between journalism and politics that probably shouldn't be happening. Also, it then goes into the Me Too issue, somewhat, but more of this favoritism for your lovers and who's getting passed over for jobs because they're not your lover. So I guess it does play into Me Too. But also another point that you're bringing up, the Cuomo vendetta. So what's interesting about this is even though this was an open secret, the reason why it came out, and I think the reason why he's now why Zucker has to go, is because this came out in the actual investigation now. So it's one thing for everybody to kind of know about it on the DL, and it's kind of hush hush, or it's open secret and everybody kind of knows. It's another thing when it goes on record. And if this goes on record in a human resources lawsuit between a former employee and the company, and then it comes out and it's on paper. I mean, how can human resources ignore that if they have a policy? They can't legally.
Right. Yes. I will bring in the fact that I'm just reading at Business Insider, and they have an article that was just published an hour ago. CNN insiders suspect Cuomo flagged Jeff Zucker's workplace relationship as revenge for firing him, report says. I don't know how much stock to put into this, but I guess a senior staffer told the Daily Beast, notice Zucker mentioned how this came from the Cuomo investigation. People think this is clearly Cuomo dragging down Zucker on his way out.
I guess it kind of depends on.
Right.
It would depend on how that came out in the case, in the investigation. So did it come out because Cuomo was like, and by the way, now that we're on record, now during this deposition, let me go ahead and tell you something. Or did it come out in another line of questioning and it wasn't really, and maybe it was Cuomo's legal team and it had nothing to do with, it might not be Cuomo himself trying to bring Zucker down. It could be just this came out during the depositions or the investigation. But either way, once it's on paper, once it's legally in the books, I mean, how are you as a company going to ignore that? You can't. I mean, I don't know if CNN had any other option.